Hello, friends. I wanted to talk about stutter starts in morning time. I have seen a couple comments on my morning time videos about people resonating with having stutter starts, and I know I sure did. And I just listened to a Dr. K video called "Can People Really Change?" that I'm going to link in the description box in case you want to check it out, because it characterized my own experience perfectly, as in, one, yes, people can change, but two, turning over a new leaf isn't as simple as like, okay, now it's turned over. Like, typically the leaf is going to turn back over, and then you're going to flip the leaf again, and maybe it'll stay flipped over longer this time, and then it's going to flip back over, and then you're going to turn it again. And that process is real. I know I sure experienced it. I've experienced it around weight loss and healthy eating. I've experienced it around, consuming alcohol off and on again. And I've experienced it around my morning time routine and self-care in general, where for about 4 years before I really had that day where I woke up and said, I'm sick of living like this and I'm going to do it different going forward. 4 years leading up to that point, I had stutter starts where I would go for a little while, taking daily care of myself, exercising, eating healthy food, getting good sleep, spending quality time with myself. And then I would feel so good that I would stop taking the medicine because I'm all better now. And I would, over the course of a few weeks, would fall back into old patterns where I'm no longer taking good care of myself. And then because I'm not, I go back to feeling really rotten. And maybe that's like another 6 months of depression. And then I feel so bad that I'm going to take really good care of myself. I'm going to do self-care every day. See, I'm going to write it down. And I would go again and do a few weeks, a month, 2 months maybe, and I would feel so good that I would be flying so high that once again I would fall off of my new routine, and in doing that fall back into old patterns. And maybe that's another 8-month depression that I lived, and that went on for 4 years of stutter starts. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately, as far as that'd be 10 years ago then, when I very first started trying to do self-care, and it didn't click in until 6 years ago. So that part of the journey I don't talk about a whole lot because I'm now on into where I am. But for the sake of, if you're just coming to self-care, I want to be very clear about, yes, I did wake up one day and I finally, now I'm 6 years into daily self-care, but there was such a period before that where it's exactly what he was describing, Dr. K, in the video that's linked below, where the stages of change and how, when we're having stutter starts, when you flip the leaf and the leaf flips itself back over, and so you flip it again and the leaf just flips itself back over. It's that part is a really fascinating process of inner conflict, is what he calls it. So that inner conflict between, there is part of you that wants to change, that wants the new behavior, and there's part of you that doesn't. There's part of you that likes it the way it is and is comfortable there. And he talks all about how we humans are typically creatures of comfort. If we're safe and snuggly in a comfortable spot, we'll just stay there. Even if that means sleeping ourselves to death, we'll stay there. And so we don't typically run towards discomfort. And when we make a change, when you change your behavior, it does take some effort in the beginning to apply to get this new habit started. When if you just stay the same, you don't have to spend the effort. You could spend that time and energy on other things, which I was. And especially as I felt better, the amount of time that I spent having relationships with people, spending time with friends or a romantic partner, or getting on online dating because I felt so good and I'm on top of the world. And now, a couple weeks into online dating, I'm no longer taking care of myself. I'm going on dates and I'm again, outwardly focused once more, and that'll trail off into months more of depression. And so those 4 years are not to be discounted, and that process of inner conflict is not to be discounted. And I love the way that he goes through it, as far as if you find yourself in that spot of like you want to change and yet you're stuck, like you feel like you can't, or you feel like it's just too big, and you know, like the person who he's talking to, the person who wrote in, wants to clean their room. It's totally trashed and they hate it being trashed. They hate living in it and they really want to do it, but they just can't. And I think we all have situations in our lives where we want something and we just can't. And the way he goes through like articulating that inner conflict, and especially the part of you that does not want to change, that's the part of us that we need to get curious about, and we need to get familiar with this part of us that doesn't want it to change. Like he also used the example of drug addicts. Like when you think about a heroin addict, think about all the things that heroin takes. You know, it takes your ability to be a member of society, essentially. It takes your home, it takes your health, it takes your relationships, it takes your money, it takes everything from you. And to maybe somebody who's not currently addicted to heroin, that sounds like a really bad deal. But you think about like, what is the heroin giving? The heroin is giving more than it's taking. Like we humans, we don't make trades that don't make sense to us. If we're gonna lose out in making this trade, we don't make it. So when somebody reaches for heroin day after day after day, that's giving them something. And when we reach for, you know, in my situation, it was very much like kind of these two patterns of behavior, where in the self-care side of things, I would take really, really good care of myself, meaning I was much more focused inwardly, and I would go along that path and I would just feel better and better and better. And eventually I felt so better that I would just jump back over here and think that I can just do it the way that I, you know, wanted to do it all along. This like part of me that didn't want to change was still alive and well and had her own agenda. And she's like, oh, you got energy now? Come on, let's go. And drags me over this way. Turns out that's perfectly normal. But like this part of me over here that was focused outwardly on building relationships with other people, this part of me had some pretty severe codependence issues. Like this part of me did not have their own security. This part of me did not know her value or her worth. She was dependent on the relationships and the reflections back from other people in order to know that about herself. And so as soon as I felt halfway decent about myself, I wanted to go get in front of some other people who could tell me how amazing I was. So like I was turning over the new leaf, and then the leaf just like blew right back over. And that happened over and over and over for those 4 years. And what ended up happening, the codependent side, you know, like why do we stay stuck? Why do we reach for the behavior that doesn't seem to serve us? Because it does. On some level, it's paying us something. We're getting something out of it. That was his recommendation. Like if you feel stuck, one, you're not. There's something about the way that your life is right now that's working for you, at least some part of you. And there is that inner conflict. So that was kind of his main advice, I guess you could say, is to become aware of what that inner conflict is. And yes, you want the change, but what is the what you're giving up, basically? Like if you were to commit to the change, you'd have to give up this other way. And for me to commit to self-care, to commit to like taking care of self, meant I needed to divorce my codependent habits. You can't have both. You can't take care of yourself and wait for other people to take care of you. It does not work. And so for me, that was very much the stutter start of my self-care, was me not really wanting to give up my addiction to my codependency. And so I'm really grateful that I engaged in a relationship that shattered my heart into a trillion pieces, which sounds like a bad outcome. I promise you it's not, because that was the moment where I saw that codependency, this is the outcome. This is the outcome every single time. The day before I had that moment where I woke up and said, I'm not living like this anymore. The day before, I'm on my living room floor in a puddle, in a ball, crying so hard I can't breathe. And the thought that came was, how am I here again? How am I here again? I recognized that place because I had been there many times over the same exact situation of my romantic partner, who I believe I cannot live without their reflection of me, walking away from me, and I am completely powerless to stop that. They take every ounce of my validation and they leave my life experience, and what I am left with is no ability to validate myself. It's just a giant gaping void of not knowing that I am lovable, not knowing that I have value or that I have worth. And when that person did that, something inside of me broke. My dependence, my reaching for codependence of like having the relationship with the other be my source of worthiness and validation and love. It was like in that moment, that was like that rock bottom moment of this codependence is no longer paying me anything that's worth it. And it was in that heartbreak that the next morning, the phoenix rose from the ashes, the pieces had come back together, and it no longer included a need for codependence, because I realized in that moment, and that was like where he started his video, was these alcoholics who gave up alcohol, and he asked them like, how'd you do that? And they say, I just woke up one day and I knew enough was enough. And like multiple people told him that, and he's like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, how could it be that? And that's exactly what happened to me. Was that day I woke up and I said, I am so fucking sick of living like this. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to take care of myself from now on. And that was a promise that I made to myself, as far as like, I am no longer waiting. I'm done waiting for somebody else to show up to take care of me. Every ounce of what I need will be provided by me going forward. This is no longer a diet that I'm trying to do for 30 days to feel better. This is my new lifestyle. I no longer am codependent. And obviously it's not that simple. There are still habits. There's still, slippery slopes back in that direction. But as far as that rock bottom moment of like having the codependent part of me disillusioned to like, I know you see value in this avenue and that's why you continue to try to get value out of this avenue. But in that moment, there was an explosion and there was nothing but charred ash of like no longer able to count on that for any kind of value. And in those ashes, a new intention rose that says, I'm now responsible for me. And I totally get what they mean when they say I woke up one day and enough was enough. I think in how Dr. K put it, it's like that was the last holdout of my inner conflict. That was the last little bit of me that was holding on to trying to do it this way, got their hand slapped hard enough that they were like, okay, fine, we'll do it your way. Well, it was like that last little bit of me came over to this side and agreed. This is the way that it needs to be done. Because when you want something, you will have it. But if you want something and another part of you wants something completely different, you'll stay in that spot of inner conflict and you'll call it stuck. And I know that it feels maddening, but like the way he describes, there's a subconscious process happening the entire time. And every time you like turn over the new leaf and like 3 weeks later it blows back, and then 6 months later you turn the leaf over again, maybe 2 months later it blows back. Like, it's not necessarily going back to square zero every single time the leaf turns back over. There's, in those stutter starts, it's like you're building muscles that don't just go away because the leaf flipped back over. It's like flipping a new leaf or making a change. It's like practice making the change over and over and over and over again until the leaf stays flipped, until the last little bit of a holdout in terms of trying to do it the old way, trying to get value out of it the old way, until that version has exhausted all options of what it can think of. It's not necessarily going to be ready to come over and like fully commit to your side. So I want to offer that as far as if you're in that space of stutter starts, maybe this video, maybe Dr. K's video helps to unpack like what is the value that your old life or your old pattern of behavior is paying you. What are you getting from that? I would love to hear from you in the comments if you have any reflections or if this wiggles anything loose. I would love to hear, do you resonate with having stutter starts in your self-care routine? Because I feel like that is totally normal, but I would love to hear what you think about that. Until next time, dear friends, keep up your attempts and hopefully take good care of yourself, and so will I.